Welcome to CWI's 2021 Annual Appraise Training. This presentation is being presented by April Boucher, Director of QA, and Jessica Lundrum, Quality Assurance Manager. Today, we are going to talk about the following training topics: promoting positive relationships, person-first language, preventing incidents, reportable incidents, reporting responsibilities, as well as the New York State Justice Center Code of Conduct.
I support ability. Support you provide assists the person in having meaningful relationships just like everyone else. Think of things you do or may do to support individuals to make informed choices, live the life they choose, work, develop, and maintain meaningful relationships, and have full access to their community. I support ability. Here you will see a picture of a city bus. Supporting the individuals we serve could include learning how to use public transportation, to go shopping, to see a movie, out to dinner, to work, or to church. I support ability. Here you will see a picture of a budget pie chart. Supporting the individuals we serve could include learning about budgeting, how to pay down debt, how to plan a vacation, or how to make a purchase. I support ability. Here you will see a picture of fitness equipment. Supporting the individuals we serve could include the support you provide helps people live the life of their choice with dignity and respect. By focusing on abilities rather than disabilities, we can build and improve positive relationships. Promoting positive relationships. OPW. What are some things you do to develop a new relationship with someone? Be friendly and smile. Show respect. Be approachable. Be concerned and interested in the person. What are their needs, preferences, and goals? Look at the person. Make eye contact. Avoid stereotypes. Ask questions. Asking questions helps us gain information about the person and helps to person-first language. Person-first language focuses on the whole person and not just their qualities. How would you reword the above sentence into person-first language? I will bring the wheelchairs to the van first. An appropriate way to phrase that sentence would be, I will bring Jane and Jack to the van. Avoid blanket rules. Sometimes rules for certain individuals are necessary, but these rules should be part of an individualized clinical plan and only apply to the person for which the rule was designed. Treat each person as an individual with their own unique needs, hopes, and dreams that you can help them move forward with every day. Support each person the best you can to make their own choices about what they want to do with their free time and when they want to do it. This helps people have a real and rich life. Code of Conduct for Custodians of People with Special Needs. This form was circulated earlier this year by Human Resources for review. The code does not give you a list of things to do, but rather provides a framework or a philosophy to guide your actions. As you may recall, the Justice Center's guiding principles include person-centered approach, physical, emotional, and personal well-being, respect, dignity, self-determination, relationships, advocacy, personal health information and confidentiality, non-discrimination, integrity, responsibility, and professional competency, and reporting requirements.
What are some steps that you can take to prevent events or situations that could endanger a person from occurring? Abuse prevention can include knowing the people you support, being able to perform your job duties. If uncomfortable with a situation, speak up, support your coworkers, ask questions if you don't understand something, and always be professional. In order to know the people that you support, it's important that you read their plans on a regular basis. This includes nursing care plans, dining care plans, behavior support plans, plan of protective oversight, and safeguards. In order to perform your job responsibilities, you need to be able to come in and be able to physically perform them. Oftentimes, when we're conducting investigations, employees speak to the point that they are uncomfortable and aren't able to speak up. It is very important to bring questions to your supervisor if you're not comfortable with something. Now we're going to talk about what constitutes reportable incidents. It is imperative that reportable incidents be reported. The reporter does not need to be concerned with the exact classification of the incident. Please note that the term custodian, as used in Part 624 reportable incidents, includes the following. Custodian refers to employees, volunteers, contractors, consultants, and family care providers of the organization. It does not include individuals receiving services unless they are also employees. There are two categories of reportable incidents. Under Part 624 regulations, this constitutes events or situations that meet social service definitions and occur under the auspices of an agency. Under the auspices of the agency essentially means that the person was receiving services and being provided supervision from employees at the time that the situation occurred. Part 625 regulations means that the event or situation did not occur when the individual was receiving services from the agency. For example, if an individual has alone time in the community and is not required to have staff supervision at that time, that would be not under our auspices, but is still reportable. Another example is if an individual is going on a home visit with their family member over the weekend and a situation occurs during that time, it is still reportable, but it is not under our auspices. The next category of incidents includes minor notable occurrences. In these situations, these incidents do not get called into the New York State Justice Center, but they do get reported to CWI's Quality Assurance Department, who then notifies OPWGD Incident Management. For all minor notable occurrences, full investigations occur. Anytime investigations occur under this category, essentially the question of the investigation is to ensure that there wasn't anything CWI could have done to prevent the incident from occurring. Examples of minor notable occurrences include theft or financial exploitation, and this is any time it has been determined that more than $15 is missing or less than or equal to $100. The other example that occurs under minor notable occurrences is an injury requiring more than first aid treatment. So if an individual falls and has an injury where it was determined that there was a positive finding for a fracture, that would be an injury more than first aid. If an individual falls, seeks outside medical treatment, there's no positive finding for fracture, stitches or staples are not required, and there's not a medication prescribed, that would not be more than first aid treatment. Next up, we have serious notable occurrences. There are two kinds of incidents under this category: deaths as well as sensitive situations. Anytime an individual in one of CWI's residential programs passes away, we are required to report this to the New York State Justice Center Mortality Hotline immediately. From that point forward, a written report gets filed called the death report. That is something that the quality assurance seeks information from the program to be able to complete that report timely, and then a full investigation is completed to ensure that there was not anything that we could have done to prevent the death from occurring. This is even to be said for when an individual is hospitalized and passes away while they are in the hospital, or even when they return home from the hospital and are on hospice care. Sensitive situations are incidents that occur that don't fit into any of the other categories, but because of the sensitivity and maybe connected with law enforcement or media, is reported to OPWDD Incident Management, and a investigation is completed. Significant incident shall mean an incident other than an incident of abuse and neglect that, because of its severity or the sensitivity of a situation, may result in or has a reasonably foreseeable potential to result in harm to the health, safety, or welfare of a person receiving services. The next couple of slides are going to give you some examples of what it may include. The first type of incident under significant incidents is conduct between individuals receiving services. This is where two or more individuals become involved in a physical altercation of some type, and one of them or both of them require treatment above and beyond first aid. If they don't require treatment above and beyond first aid, we still look into those situations. It's documented on a behavior intervention log, and the person's clinical team members discuss necessary action steps to help minimize this from happening again in the future. Seclusion. This is the placement of a person receiving services in a room or area where he or she perceives that they cannot leave at their own free will. Unauthorized use of timeout is when a person receiving services is removed from their regular programming and is isolated in a room or area for the convenience of a custodian, for disciplinary purposes, or as a substitute for programming. The only time this is permissible is if it is part of somebody's behavior support plan. And in that instance, it needs to be spelled out when it is appropriate for them to be pulled out of the main programming area, as well as we need to receive informed consent from the person or their party that provides informed consent from them, and then it needs to go through Human Rights Committee approval, and this needs to happen on an annual basis. Medication error with adverse effect. This is the administration of a prescribed or over-the-counter medication that is either A, inconsistent with the physician's orders, or the person has an adverse effect from the administration of this medication. Inappropriate use of restraints. This is the use of a restraint when the technique that is used, the amount of force that is used, or the situation in which the restraint is used is inconsistent with an individual's plan of service. For example, that could include their behavior support plan, their plan of protective oversight, or their safeguards in their staff action plan. A restraint includes any manual, any chemical, including medications, or mechanical measures or a device to immobilize or limit the ability of the person receiving services to freely move his or her arms, legs, or body. The three images you see here represent the most common restraints that we see at CWI. The first one is a harness. The second one is a capsule indicating a medication used to control or modify an individual's maladaptive behavior. And then lastly is a physical restraint, otherwise known as a skip technique. Mistreatment. This is a category that we most often see in investigations, and depending on the information that is shared when called into the Justice Center, will either be categorized as a significant incident mistreatment, or sometimes based on the impact that it has on the individual, can be classified as abuse or neglect. So mistreatment is defined as an action or inaction by a custodian that does not meet the definition of abuse or neglect or any other type of significant, but because of the negative impact that it might have on the individual's well-being, would be constituted as mistreatment. What's happening here? On this slide, we have 4 images of situations that could potentially be called into the Justice Center and constitute mistreatment. In the first photo, it looks like we have one gentleman making the other gentleman feel bad by quote unquote yelling at the other person. In the second photo, we have a plate with food on it. In many of our programs, we have individuals that have diet orders prescribed by their physician, as well as respective dining care plans that follow those diet orders. So if we are not implementing those diet orders or dining care plans appropriately, and something happens to the individual, such as choking by not implementing the diet order correctly, that is an example of something that would be called into the New York State Justice Center and could be either constituted as mistreatment as well as a choking situation. In the third photo, we have a picture of a calendar with a doctor's appointment on it. It's very important that when an individual has a doctor's appointment scheduled, that we ensure that we get them to the doctor's appointment and follow all necessary orders following that doctor's appointment, whether it be scheduling lab work or getting a urinalysis, because if we don't follow those appointments and those orders, and there is a negative impact as a result, it could either be considered mistreatment or neglect. In the last image here, it is a picture of a restroom, and some of our individuals in their plans of protective oversight or in their behavior support plans or in their safeguards have it dictated what kind of support individuals need while they are using the restrooms or additional supervision that they need. If we are not providing the appropriate support or supervision, that is an example of something that could constitute mistreatment. Next up is missing person. This is when we have the unexpected absence of an individual receiving services that, based on the person's history and current condition, that it may expose him or her to risk of injury. For example, if we have an individual that has alone time in the community, they go out for a walk, they don't come home within their specified period of time, and during that specified period of time, they're due to get their diabetes medication, they are at risk of injury, illness, or harm as a result of not getting their medication on time. Unauthorized absence. This is the unexpected or unauthorized absence of a person after CWI has implemented formal search procedures. Choking. This is the partial or complete blockage of the upper airway by an inhaled or swallowed foreign body, including food, that leads to partial or complete inability to breathe. Please remember that in order for choking to truly occur, that is a little bit different than a swallowing situation where something goes down the wrong way. If somebody does not have the ability to cough, they're turning blue, and you have to provide the Heimlich maneuver. Those are true examples of a choking situation. There are two types of choking. There's choking with known risk and choking with known risk. In order for it to be choking with known risk, essentially the person has been prescribed a diet order, has a dining care plan, and or has a history of aspiration pneumonia. Self-abusive behavior with injury. We have a number of individuals at CWI that have behavior support plans that identify self-abusive behavior as a target behavior. Self-abusive behavior in itself is not a reportable incident to the Justice Center. If there is self-abusive behavior without an injury that requires more than first aid, that does not require more than first aid treatment, that would be captured on a behavior intervention log and are reviewed with a clinical team. If the self-abusive behavior results in injury requiring more than first aid treatment, that is when it becomes a reportable incident that needs to be called into the New York State Justice Center. Injury with hospital admission. Injury with hospital admission is essentially when somebody has an injury, they require more than first aid treatment, as well as being admitted to the hospital as a result of that injury. Theft and financial exploitation. Similarly to what we spoke about as a minor notable incident, theft and financial exploitation in this instance becomes reportable to the New York State Justice Center hotline. The examples under here are pattern or theft of personal property. There's no minimum value here. In this instance, when we determine that somebody's funds are missing, is over $100. When we determine that somebody has been financially exploited by use of their credit, debit, or benefit card, there is not a minimum value associated with it. So whether it's $2, $5, $25, for example, if a staff person is taking an individual grocery shopping and buys themselves a bag of potato chips on the individual's credit card or debit card, that would be a reportable incident. Other significant incidents. This is when an incident that occurs under the auspices of an agency, but that does not involve conduct on part of the custodian, otherwise known as the employee. It does not meet the definition of any other incident described in the subdivision, but because of its severity and the sensitivity of the situation that it may result in or has the reasonably foreseeable potential to result in harm to the individual's health, safety, or welfare of the person is reportable. Now we're going to talk about situations that may constitute an allegation of abuse and neglect. In order for something to be classified as abuse and neglect based on definition, it will need to include that conscious intention on part of the custodian, have an intended outcome, and involve reckless behavior on part of the employee. Examples of physical abuse may include slapping, hitting, kicking, biting, burning, shaking, choking, punching, shoving, cutting, dragging. It's very important when you're assisting an individual to ensure that you are following their plan if there's specified instructions on how to assist them from one location to another. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse includes the following: inappropriate touching, voyeurism, sexual assault, taking sexually explicit photos, distributing sexually explicit photos, and indecent exposure. Psychological abuse. You'll see here that there are some similarities when we spoke about significant incident mistreatment. Actions under psychological abuse include taunts, threats, intimidation, ridicule, display of weapon or object, and derogatory comments. Sometimes that includes name calling, and sometimes that includes the tone of voice in which you're speaking to an individual. In order for psychological abuse to be substantiated, An assessment needs to be completed by a trained clinician at CWI to determine that the actions of the employee had a long-lasting impact on the individual receiving services. If the assessment determines that it did not have a long-lasting impact on the individual receiving services, but the action was found to have occurred, it will be downgraded to a significant incident mistreatment. Deliberate inappropriate use of restraints. Similar to where we spoke about earlier under significant incidents, we have several different kinds of restraints that individuals are approved to use at CWI. Mechanical restraints, such as the harness that we spoke about earlier, chemical restraints, such as psychotropic medications controlled by a physician to control or modify maladaptive behavior, as well as physical restraints, otherwise known as our SCIP techniques. Use of aversive conditioning. This is the application of a physical stimulus that is intended to induce pain or discomfort in order to modify or change the behavior of the person receiving services. So some examples here would be withholding food from somebody, putting a blindfold on somebody so they can't see where they're going and it causes them some distress, altering a person's food, such as using Tabasco sauce, or withholding somebody's ability to sleep because they stayed up too late. Obstruction. Essentially, obstruction is when we do not report an incident, if we do not report the incident appropriately and are not telling the truth about an incident that had occurred. Unlawful use or administration of a controlled substance. So if we're not administering the controlled substance per the doctor's orders, that is something that could be constituted as unlawful use or administration of a controlled substance. Neglect. This is the failure to provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, medical, dental, optometric, or surgical care. It also can be failure to provide proper supervision that is prescribed in a person's plan of service. When incidents occur not under CWI's offices, for example, if you are going to another organization to pick up an individual that lives in CWI's residential facilities, or if it's somebody in CWI's residential facilities going to pick up somebody at another day program outside of CWI, those are examples of not under our auspices. If you recognize an incident, like any of the situations we just described in all of the previous slides, you have the responsibility to notify CWI of that situation so that we can ensure that proper notifications are made. Those notifications include notifying the management of the facility where you witnessed that situation. It could be school, hospital, doctor's office, or another agency similar to CWI, such as AIM, Warren Washington Albany ARC, Liberty House, or a state-operated IRA. Like we said, it's important to notify CWI's Quality Assurance Department so that we can notify that other organization or that facility and then make notifications to the New York State Justice Center where applicable. What are your responsibilities as a custodian as it relates to incidents? It's important to immediately intervene. From there, you want to protect the individual from further harm. So it's putting proper protections in place, providing any first aid treatment that is necessary, and communicating with all the appropriate parties by immediately reporting it. Jonathan's Law and confidentiality. Jonathan's Law was put into place to govern the way in which information and reports of investigations are shared and whom they're shared with. You may be asked for information by family members or advocates or care managers about the investigation progress or your involvement in it. You should refer that person requesting the information to your supervisor or QA so that only the appropriate people receive the information with those that have the right to know. The investigative process from start to finish. So step number 1, somebody identifies that an incident occurs. They discovered the incident. Protections are put in place. That could be retraining, it could be removal of the employee, it could be transfer of the employee to a different department until the investigation has concluded. If it is an allegation of physical abuse or sexual abuse, law enforcement is notified. First aid checks are done if it involves any hands-on. From there, notifications are made, whether it be to QA, to OPWDD Incident Management, to the New York State Justice Center, as well as to the person's Jonathan's Law contact and care manager, as well as sometimes, depending on the severity, mental hygiene legal services. From there, the investigation starts. The investigator is assigned. They start gathering information, reviewing all the relevant documents associated with what was reported. They conduct interviews with all of the witnesses and any experts in the matter, as well as the person who has been identified as the subject of the investigation. From there, the investigator writes a report. They come up with findings and conclusions and recommendations. That investigation is submitted to our Vice President, CEO, as well as the Division Director where the incident occurred. And then once it is finalized, it is submitted to OPWDD's Incident Management Unit and the New York State Justice Center. For allegations of abuse and neglect, from the beginning, a subject is identified. That person is notified by their supervisor, and then quality assurance sends a subject letter to that employee, letting them know that they have been identified as a subject in the investigation. Please remember that anybody can report anything. It doesn't mean that the situation occurred. That is what the investigation process is all about. It's a fact-finding process to determine whether or not the situation that was reported occurred. For allegations of abuse and neglect, as I mentioned previously, law enforcement is notified for sexual and physical abuse allegations. Lastly, New York State Justice Center makes the final determination on all allegations of abuse and neglect, and then they distribute a letter of determination to the subject of the investigation as well as CWI administration. For all conducted investigations, there are 2 possible outcomes. For abuse and neglect, the investigation will either be substantiated or unsubstantiated. If an investigation is substantiated, that means that there was enough evidence during the investigation to be able to conclude that the event that was reported did occur. If it is deemed unsubstantiated, it means that there was not enough evidence to show that the situation that was reported occurred, or that there was enough evidence to show that it did not occur. Significant incidents is different terminology, but essentially the same information. Founded and unfounded. So founded means that the situation did have enough evidence to show that the event did occur. Unfounded, same thing in regards to there was not enough evidence to show that it occurred, or there was enough evidence to show that it did not occur. For questions or notifications, you can reach out to Quality Assurance at our main agency phone number, 518-793-4700, and our respective extensions are 12123, 12132. You can also reach out to CWI's Corporate Compliance Hotline at 518-793-4700, extension 12168. The New York State Justice Center VPCR, where you call to report an incident, is 1-855-373-2122. For incidents of death that occur in CWI's residence, there's a special phone number to call, and that is the Mortality Review Line, and that is 1-855-373-2122. 2124. Should you have any questions about any of the content that was reviewed, please reach out to April Boucher, Director of Quality Assurance, or Jessica Lundrum, Quality Assurance Manager. Thank you for your time.